Shabbat Shalom. What is so amazing about what we just sang, thank you Chris, Christian, Natalie, is that today we are doing the Torah portion of Korach. And where Korach was, what was his big focus in life? I want to be exalted. And the antithesis of the spirit of Korach, focusing on myself and I want to be exalted, is let your name be exalted. Let your name, King above, of all, King of all kings, let your name be made great. And we sing unto you. And it is when we sing unto Him and we exalt His name that we will grow in our faith for this journey through the wilderness. Because each one of us are in some way, one way or another, in a wilderness. And the way to go through this wilderness, which, by the way, is uncharted territory, otherwise it would not have been a wilderness. There's only one way. Yeshua, our King. You lead us through this uncharted territory called the wilderness. And we are in the book, Bemidbar, in the wilderness. We're reading the book of Numbers to learn how do we navigate our lives through the wilderness, through uncharted territories. And so, it's quite important to reflect back a little bit and say, but when our Master has put this great Torah together, and he sort of staggered it up, and said, okay, at some point in time, I would like to instruct my beloved children as to how to journey through the wilderness. I should not do that. This thing is important because otherwise you can't see this. How to direct our lives through the wilderness, he says, my children, my beloved children, at one point in time are going to wait for me. And it's going to feel for them as if they are in the wilderness. So I'm going to give them my loving instructions how to navigate their lives through the wilderness and to the promised land. Because between where they are and where they are going, they've got no clue. Well, that's a good place to be. Because, why? You can only get from where you are to the promised land if somebody will show you the way. Because you don't have a map. There ain't no maps. So we started this journey way back in the book Bereshit, Genesis. In the beginning, the Father promised the Son as a Redeemer and established a covenantal inheritance and prophecy unto its fulfillment. That's the book of Genesis. There's a promise of a son, and there's a covenantal inheritance that's been prophesied. And then huge, big family role play, playing this out, learning as many different things. That's in the beginning, the book of Genesis. There's a son is coming, Genesis 3. And then there's a covenant, Genesis 15, playing itself out. Beyond that. And then, after this establishment, we get the book of Exodus, the book of names, Shemot, where the establishment of names, the identity of the people who would usher in the Son and inherit the land and live according to the covenant. The book of Exodus. Establishing the identity of who is going to usher in the Son and who's going to live according to the covenant. And then the book of Vayikra. And he called Leviticus. the preparation and calling to duty of a set-apart people for a set-apart L to live a covenantal fulfilling relationship in the land. So in the beginning, promise of the Son, plus then the promise of the prophecy and the inheritance. The book of Exodus, establishing the identity of the people who will do that. The book of Leviticus, the calling to duty to be set apart for a set apart L. And then, the book of Bamidbar, in the wilderness. The journey to the promised land through the wilderness. That wilderness, a holding place for learning. That's where we are. A holding place for learning. Before entering the promised inheritance. Now when you go to a mall, you will see there's something to direct you as to where is which shop, and it will say, you are here. Well, you are here, in the wilderness. So if it feels sometimes that you are in the wilderness, that's probably because you are. You can relate to that? Say, I don't know, I'm in the wilderness. Good, you're at the right place. And so the book of Bamidbar, Numbers, have got incredible meaning for us, for two reasons. The one is, it's what we read currently in the Torah cycle. But secondly, it is written for this period between Shavuot and Sukkot. That's why we read it, between Shavuot and Sukkot. Because prophetically, that's the time zone in which we are. Prophetically, Shavuot happened, Pentecost, the book of Deuteronomy, Acts. This happened. Sukkot, the Messiah with us, has not happened. Prophetically speaking, on the prophetic timeline, we're in this time slot between Shavuot and Sukkot. So we read the book Bamidbar in this time zone between Shavuot and Sukkot, because we're in the wilderness. We're on this journey to the promised land, but we're not there yet. We've got a lot. We've got Moses, we've got the Gospels, we've got the prophets, we've got Paul, we've got the book of the Apocalypse, we've got so much. And the Spirit of Abba Father to guide us through this journey. And so, when we feel that we are in the wilderness, we might become bewildered sometimes. Well, perhaps more than sometimes, quite regularly actually sometimes. And that is okay. It's okay for as long as one realizes that the wilderness is a holding place for learning. If you think the wilderness is the end zone, well, that's desperate. I mean, how dry can it be then if you think the wilderness is the end game? It's not the end game. It's just a holding place for learning. And so, now we can go on this journey, realizing that in this holding place of learning, we have to ask a couple of questions. Since I'm going to school, well, okay, what do I have to learn and why should I learn something? Why should I learn to 1 + 1? Why should I do that? And then once you start to understand the rationale, the reason why you're in this place of learning, heck, it makes it much easier to actually study. Well, only for some people, not for everybody, but okay, that's a different story. So, here we start in Numbers 1 verse 1. It says, and Jehovah spoke to Moshe in the wilderness of Sinai, in the tent of meeting. And so that's where we get the word Bamidbar, in the wilderness, from, in the very first verse. But we have to ask ourselves this rather silly question. Since it's a place of learning, so we are allowed to ask questions. So is it a dry place, a desolate place, an uninhabitable place? What is this wilderness? I couldn't resist the temptation to say that it might not be what we think it is, and it might not be such a bad place after all. Where is our dear friends from the wilderness? There they are. They will recognize the hamlet of the wilderness. So it might not be what we think it is. It's been given this name, the wilderness, and we've got sort of an idea in a mental picture of what a wilderness might look like. But when we see it as a place of learning, as a place of edification, as a place of preparation, as a holding place, as a place through which we have to go to our own good, then it might not be such a bad place after all. And then, as Johan has mentioned last week, that currently in the reading of the Torah, we're in the wilderness of Paran, and the word Paran means either to glorify or to be glorified. So either you glorify something, somebody, Abba Father, the Holy One of Israel, or you seek to usurp glory. But the important thing of Paran is that the reality might not be what it looks like. You have to look a little bit deeper to seek the truth. So, when we think in terms of the different words and what they mean, we see the word desert, various different words for it. The first is Arava, which is a sterile place, or a Yeshimon, which is a solitary place, or a Chorba, which is a dry place. But that is not when the word wilderness is used. None of that is implied. And Jehovah spoke, Davar, in the wilderness, Midbar. So it does not refer to an Arava, a dry place or a sterile place or a solitary place. So when we have this mental picture of a dry place or a solitary place or an uninhabitable place, then that mental picture is actually wrong. Because that's not what is written there. So, midbar is a noun, and it's derived from davar, which is the verb, which means to speak. So here we've got this interesting concoction of a noun, a place, that's derived from a verb. And you have to see the two together in order to understand what it actually means. So putting them together, so in the plain sense, the noun, the midbar, it is a plain to which livestock is driven, clearly. But it's also a place of speech or of words. And so it becomes a place where words are driven to. Or, if you want to put it then in the context of Numbers 1 verse 1, a noun, a place derived from an action or a deed of spoken words, which is the verb. And then Numbers 1 verse 1 could be read as, and Jehovah spoke to Moshe in the place where words are driving, directing, leading us. Well, that's something different than just the book of Numbers. He spoke words in a place where words are driving, directing, leading us. So how important is His words? And how do we hunger for His words to give us that direction through the wilderness? Because in the wilderness, there's no map. There's only words. So the question is, which words are driving us through life, through this wilderness? The words of the spies, which are the newspapers, tours the land. Johannes said last week to go and spy the land. The Hebrew word is the word tour, which means to go and do reconnaissance. It's a word to tour. So it's the Hebrew word and English word is very close to each other. Well, even the Afrikaans word. The tour is to tour. What does a newspaper reporter do? They tour the land, they go and they come back and they say, well, ABC has happened in country X, Y, and Z. What report do they bring back? And do you bow down before their report? And as Chris has prayed at the end of the worship, those words, do they fill us with fear, trembling, angst? Do they drive us back to Egypt? Or do they make us more motivated to continue in faith? Or the words of Korach, this week's portion, which are the works of close relatives, compatriots, colleagues. Do we listen to them? Or perhaps, are we Korach for somebody else, where our words are demotivating somebody else? Where our words are trying to push other people out of their respective callings. Because remember the book before this one, book Vayikra, that deals with and he called. So he put everybody and everything in place to do A, B, C, D for good order. In the wilderness, listening to Korach can create chaos in that structure and destroy the callings and make confusion. And it's then out of that confusion, whose word are you going to listen to? How are you going to go through this area, through this place where we have to be driven by words? Guided through by words. Are we going to listen to Moses? Which is then giving us Father's words. And so in this, how important does the book of Bamidbar then becomes in this junction of time where we are, where we have to listen to words for direction going forward. So life is now in uncharted territory. That's the place where we are, uncharted. That must be crossed over by means of the following of words. And now it becomes very important to discern the voice that we're listening to. And not just the voice that we're listening to, but also the words that we speak ourselves. Because we can be called out to somebody else. To great destruction. And so the wilderness is a place which can also be a state of mind. Actually, I think it's more of a state of mind than a physical place, which is that uncharted territory that can only be crossed or overcome by hearing and adhering to His spoken words. And so we're getting this Torah portion of Korach at a very important junction where Father knew that we're going to need guidance. And so He says to us, first the spies, now Korach. What is He doing? He's taking effectively different situations from the lives of our father in the days, from our fathers in the wilderness of Paran, to say, but you are going to encounter similar situations. How are you going to respond? Don't respond like that, because you have got a place to go to. So the wilderness of the soul, of the mind, is where we are stuck. Been stuck before? Nobody has been stuck before. Absolutely no idea where to go to. Okay, so that's only me then, but I've been regularly stuck in my life. Like I've got no idea how to go forward. That's a good place also to be. No way out. No idea how to proceed. It's uncharted territory. I'm stuck. Now, I've got those two little pictures there of ancient maps. It's told that when they send the people out to explore, the great explorers, 1400s, 1500s, 1600s, they will explore a specific territory and they will map it carefully. But they can only go up to a specific frontier. Then they have to turn back and go and report back to the king. And up to that frontier, they will then mark that frontier on the map which have been carefully drawn. And then on the other side of the frontier, they will have this little note, here be dragons. There is something out there, but we don't know what it is. There might be dragons. And so, when you and I are stuck, we often will say, there might be dragons in the future. We don't know. And then you start to build mental pictures of these dragons. And you start to fear these dragons. And those dragons make that you don't want to go and re-explore. You don't want to go back to that frontier because there's a little note that says there could be dragons. It doesn't say there are dragons. Just there could be dragons. And that's the antithesis of faith. That's the antithesis of faith. Where He has called us to step out into those uncharted territories because we believe, because of Him. Because the moment that we do that, what happens? You and I can't go there on our own resources because we don't have a map. We can only venture out by faith, in humility, before Him. And so, this training place, this training zone is, I don't want to say it's all about the soul or the mind, but it's so much about it. Because remember, the Shekinah, the glory of Abba Father, is there in their midst, in the tabernacle. So His Spirit is there. His glory is there. Moses is there. The promise is there. The covenant is there. Everything is in place. Now it's the mind. It's the mind, the soul, that needs to push you over this barrier in order to inherit this prophecy, this land that He has given us. And in the mind could be the attitude of a slave of Egypt. And the attitude, the mentality of a slave of Egypt could actually then prevent you from entering into that promise. And so we have to let go of that mental barrier. And so the book of Bamidbar, this training ground of faith, is so that to our own edification, so that we can really learn to trust Him going forward. I'm going to tell a short story. This could go long, but I'll try my best to make it short. Of a time when I got stuck, physically stuck. We were doing surveys in Mozambique, and we had to cross an old rice paddy. And so we were standing on this one edge, on this one side, and we said, well, let's go to the other side. There's absolutely no roads, no people, nothing. It's the wilderness. So just let's go. So off we go. And driving my beloved cruiser. If you're in a cruiser, you're invincible, and you go. And a friend of mine and I and our two sons, and it went very well. But nothing as it seems to be. the grass happens to be much taller than what the cruiser is high. I could see nothing. Absolutely nothing. Much taller than what I thought. And so you can't even send the scouts out because they're much taller than what our children are, so the children will get lost. So you can't send somebody out to run in front because you will never find them in this grass forest. What we've learned later is that it's also swarming with snakes, so just as well that they haven't gone out there. And it's been razor sharp, the blade. So it's good that they stayed in the car. Okay. And it's good that the mothers were not there. And what we did not know at that point in time was that it was also riddled with irrigation ditches used for flood irrigation. Very deep irrigation ditches. So we go through. Oh, this is fun, because you can't even see them. You just go down. And then at one point, we're stuck. I took this photo standing on the bull bar of the cruiser, and I couldn't even see the other side over the top of the ditch. There's absolutely nobody. And it's uncharted. So we sat on top of the roof of the cruiser, and we ate our lunch boxes, and we said, well, what are we going to do now? Funny story, but I mean, much happened in and during that time. Also a lot of prayer, I must say. And then, at some point in time, after a couple of hours, out of absolutely nowhere, came a blue Landini tracker. We didn't send for it. No, we saw nobody seeing us. And the Landini tractor just arrived, pulled us out, and before I could thank him, he left. Never got his name, never got his telephone number, nothing. Yeah, I could have been, but I think that was a real tractor. Getting unstuck often requires the help from strangers. But the point that I wanted to make is that getting stuck is something physical, can happen, like this. But it is what happens in your mind when you are stuck that's important. What mind games are happening during that time when you are stuck? What sort of dragons are you starting to see? And how do you communicate with one another among your friends? And what sort of stories are we starting to tell with each other? And then there's always a way out. I'm here today, so I didn't stay stuck. Abba Father will make the way for us. Doesn't matter what the degree or the type or the form of stuckness might be. We must just not be stuck up. Because if we are stuck up, we will remain stuck. I didn't plan that sentence, but it did work. False gods desires to be seen. The true God must be heard. And that's why the Shema is the watchword of our faith. And it's for us to learn that voice so that we can Shema. His words, the guide, the roadmap through the uncharted territory. And that's why Paul has also written, therefore being always of good courage, even if you are in the ditch and you can see nobody, and if there's no way out, for we walk by belief, by faith, not by sight. And while this is an easy word to speak, it's a hard work to practice, and it's something that we have to go through each individually. But when we are in the wilderness, and we are confronted with challenges, we have to realize it's a place where we have to train our faith. Because our fathers were there. They were in the wilderness. We are in the wilderness. But the Spirit of Abba Father is with us. His truth is with us. The fellowship is with us. And together we can go forward. I'm saying this especially also in a time where there's sort of an anticipation that, well, it's rather tough at the moment, but it's likely to become much tougher going forward. Like, much tougher. Something like tribulation. Tougher. Like what the world has never ever seen or experienced. Worse than all the world wars. So we're in the training ground now, preparing ourselves to go through. How do we prepare to go through? It starts with how we think about it. Do we have the faith in Abba Father that He will lead us through to the promised land? There will be a tractor to pull us out. And not be intimidated by Paran. Not be intimidated by the physical circumstances of the wilderness, the reports of other people, or seeking own glory, but esteem His name. Worship His name. As we've done this morning. Glorifying His name. And it's in this context where Korach is of specific importance to us today. So who's Korach? Well, a little family tree. So, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Levi, 3 sons, Gershon, Kohat, Merari. Johan spoke about their specific callings a couple of weeks ago. Gershon had his jobs about the woven material. Merari had his job with respect to carrying the wooden parts. And then the Kohat, that family had the responsibility of carrying the furniture, the covered furniture. The furniture first covered, and then they have to carry this carried furniture. But Kohat had 4 sons, Amram, Izhar, Hebron, and then Uzziel. And Korah sits there as a direct first cousin to Aaron and Miriam and Moses. Out of Amram came the Cohen, the priests, who's been taken out to be serving as the priests in the tent of meeting. And then the balance of the children of Kohat had to carry the furnitures. So if you think in terms of esteemed positions, well, that's it. Him being a firstborn there, that's what that little thingy means there. He's a firstborn in that from Izhar. Very esteemed position. And then Moses, after the uprising of Korah, is saying these words. Hear now, you sons of Levi, is it little to you that the Elohim of Israel has separated you from the congregation of Israel to bring you near to Himself, to perform the service of the dwelling place of Jehovah, and to stand before the congregation to serve them, and that He has brought you here near to Himself, you and all your brothers, the sons of Levi, with you. Yet you seek the priesthood as well. Therefore, you and all your company are set against Jehovah. And that's the big admonishment. That's the big accusation here. Not that they have risen up against Moses and Aaron, but that they have set themselves against the Almighty. And thus, we see today the theology of Korah. The theology of Korah is one which usurps leadership, sows seeds of discontent among close relatives and compatriots, and that's not just other people, that could be you and me as well. Rebellion. But most importantly, they stood up to speak against Moses. And by speaking against Moses, they're setting themselves up against the Almighty. And there's no stronger words that I can pick than this, is that whatever you and I are doing, do not speak against Moses. Because the moment that we do that, we set ourselves up against the Almighty. The theology of Korach is alive and well. But out of the theology of Korach breeds a theology at a season of disrespect. Disrespect of life, people, the creation, the environment, property, differences, disrespect on every single facet of life that you and I can imagine. You can think of any form of disrespect that we see in the world out there. It is a form, it's a manifestation of the theology of Korach. Then we realize, sorry, that was too much, that Korach is alive and well today. And the tragedy is, by joining Korach's company, you will die in the wilderness. You will not be able to proceed forward in faith. Because remember the sequence, Bereshit, promise of a redeemed son, a redeemer, the son, and the prophecy that goes with it to inherit the land. Exodus, the identity of the people to inherit it. Leviticus, the calling of people to do the job according to their orders, according to their specific callings. And we have to respect that. Because if we do not respect the protocols given to us in the book of Leviticus, theology of Korach, disrespect. So what Korach did, the book of Leviticus was probably not yet written. Well, it was not yet written, they were still living it. But he stood up against what was standing in the book of Leviticus, against that order. And so today, if we stand up against the orders, the protocols, the loving instructions, the guidelines that is laid out for us in the book of Leviticus in terms of how to be a set-apart people, to serve a set-apart El, and follow that protocols and orders, we are joining Korach. And therefore I'm saying this rather hesitantly, but I think each one of us, at one point in time, has been or are a Korach, of which we have to repent. Because with a Korach attitude, we cannot go through in faith. It's the antithesis of faith. And so, in the very same reading of Korach, in the book of Numbers, we find an Abba Father to give us to re-emphasize the purpose of the priesthood, the roles of the priest and the Levites. In same reading, the teaching about the priesthood. And therefore we have to look at Korach also through that lens, that it is to our benefit, to our edification, as teaching material. Because in Numbers 18 we read, "And you shall guard the duty of the set-apart place and the duty of the altar, so that there be no more wrath on the children of Israel. And the Levites is a gift to you, given by Jehovah, to do the service of the tent of meeting." A service in the tent of meeting. So now we have to ask the question, how is that applicable to us today? So where is this place of the tent of meeting, and where are the Levites today? And then we suddenly realize, but there are two priesthoods. Levi, Melchizedek. everybody called to be a priest in the order of Melchizedek. Every one of us called to be a priest. Everyone called to be a service in the tent of meeting. But what is the purpose of the service unto the tent in the tent of meeting? To bring glory to the one and only true God, to His Shekinah, to His glory, to His majesty, to His esteem. And so, what is a priest doing? A priest facilitates and assists others in the worship of the Father and to His glory. It's a very simple definition of a priest. When you and I facilitate and assist others in the worship of the Father and to His glory, we are good priests. If we do not do that, then we're Korach. And it's so interesting that the Scripture has given us ample examples of people who operated in the spirit of or in the theology of Korach. Not going to read everything in Ezekiel 34, but there's this great, this massive section about the shepherds, where the shepherds, they were enriching themselves. They were feeding themselves to the detriment of the flock. They were exalting themselves above that of the flock. And they were not bringing glory to the Father, but they were seeking their own glory. There is very good reason that Ezekiel 34 is not often used from the platforms as teaching material, because it's not making very happy reading. Neither does Matthew 7 enter into teaching material regularly. Not everyone who says to me, Master, Master, shall enter into the kingdom of heavens, but he who is doing the desires of my Father in heaven. In other words, those who have been called Vayikra and who is worshipping unto the glory of the Father. Who's not Korach, the antithesis of Korach. Many shall say to me that day, Master, Master, have we not prophesied in your name, and cast out demons in your name, and done many things in your name? And then I shall declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who work lawlessness. In other words, you stood opposed to Moses, Torahlessness. In other words, you did all of those great things, not to the glory of Abba Father, not to the glory of the Almighty, not to the glory of the King, but to the glory of an individual or of an institution or other motives. And then Matthew 23, only a few days before the death of our Master. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, blind guides. And he was really laying it into the religious leaders of the day. Hypocrites, whitewashed tombs, hypocrites, several times that it's been repeated, and then it concludes with serpents, brood of adders. It's rather harsh words. But they were following the theology of Korach. And so we have to be very vigilant against the theology of Korach. Because it could be something that can really destroy our calling, and much more than just destroying the calling, causing so much confusion, and it can lead to death in the wilderness. And so we have to ask the question, how do we avoid falling in the trap of the theology of Korach? We have the example of the one who got it right, the Messiah. And we have to remember that the Messiah is called the high priest. So what does that mean? He's a priest. So what does a priest do? assists and facilitates the worship of Abba Father. So when we then look at Messiah, what did he do? Assist and facilitate the worship of Abba Father, and to perfection. John 17, couple of hours, 20 hours before his death. I have esteemed you on the earth, having accomplished the work you have given me that I should do. Facilitate worship unto the glory of the Father, the perfect example. Glory unto his name. And when we then look at the Messiah as a priest, who then says, I will guide you through this wilderness. And we do not usurp his glory. We do not diminish his name. But we actually exalt his name, like we've done this morning while singing. I was just so overwhelmed by it. Then we have to ask the question, how can we then follow in his footsteps to the glory? Now about a third, perhaps a bit more of a third, about 40% of the book of John deals with the 24 hours before his crucifixion. John 12 about starts and it goes up to about John 18 that deals with the crucifixion process. So bulk of the book of John. So it's only a few hours before he said this, he shared this with us. Let not your heart be troubled. Why? Don't feel that you are in the wilderness lost, that you don't know how to get unstuck out of the wilderness. Have faith in him, believe in him, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many staying places, many dwelling places. It's the prophecy given unto Abraham. Many sons. Look at the stars, look at the sand. There's many places. It's the prophecy of Abraham. And if not, I would have told you, I go to prepare a place for you. Assist, facilitate the worship of the Father, to do my job as a priest, the high priest. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I shall come again and receive you to myself, that there I am, you might be too. Where will that be? In the presence, in the Shekinah of Abba Father, in the glory. Taking us, facilitating us to that place, to the glory. Now where I go, you know, and the way you know. And Thomas said to him, Master, we do not know where you are going. We're lost. And Yeshua said to him, I am the way, the truth, the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you had known me, you would have known my Father too. From now on, you know him and have seen. And so we see the book of Bamidbar in the wilderness. They were stuck. And they had all these different spy reports, newspapers, Korach, family members, relatives, getting into the minds of the people, distracting them, stealing them, robbing the prophecy of going to the promised land. And it can easily play out again. Let your heart not be troubled. Have faith. I am the way, the truth, the life. Isn't it not amazing then to realize that there are 3 gates in the tabernacle, and they happen to have been called the way, the truth, the life. Terek, Emet, Chai. And so Yeshua the high priest facilitates our journey through the tabernacle, starting at the way, at the eastern side, towards the glory of the Father, the Shekinah in the Holy of Holies. Going through the way, the truth, the life. If we do not pitch, if we do not come to that entrance of the tabernacle, if we do not come into a place where we say, yes, please, I would like to enter. I'm a sinner. help me, he will stay outside. But then he invites us to come to the way. And once we're in through the way, we're at the altar. Forgiveness of sins. Washing. But while we're there, we've been prepared for the truth. Once we've perceived the truth, what do? What's right in front of us? The altar of incense. Our worship. Our praise. Our glory unto Him. And the light, the menorah, and the bread of life. And then, at some point in time, Revelation 22 writes about it. There will be no more sun, because the light of the sun will shine. And we will have and experience the presence of that glory, Shekinah, in all its magnitude. And He guides us through this. Very often, in Scripture, where the words occur the first time, or round about the first time, is where the concepts are defined, or where we actually should look for its definition. So what does Derek mean? It's not a person's name. Derek, somebody. What does it mean? Where does it occur the first time in Scripture? Because where it appears the first time in Scripture and what it means there might actually provide us with a bit of a clue as to what that first entrance mean and what it represent. Where do we find truth, emet? And where do we find life? Chai. Let's have a look. So, we find the word Derek the first time in Genesis 3. But Jehovah Elohim said, see, the man has become like one of us to know good and evil, and now let him put out his hand and take also of the tree of life and eat and live forever. So Jehovah Elohim sent him out of the Garden of Eden to till the ground from which he was taken, and he drove the man out. And he placed the cherubim at the east of the Garden of the Eden, and the flaming sword which was turned every way to guard, which is a hedge of thorns, the way to the tree of life. The way or the access to the tree of life is blocked. It is surrounded by a hedge of thorns and protected by armed cherubim. So when we are saying that He is the way, what does that mean? There is a special passport to get past this cherubim that's protecting it. Because in Him only, through Him and in the Messiah, we can get past this protection. But once we are in Him, that protection, that guard, that hedge of thorns is what? Granted to those who believe in Him. To protect them on their journey through the wilderness. Now His glory, His majesty, His name becomes our protection. Unto His glory. And therefore it is so important not to then usurp any honor or glory unto self. Because it's only through Him that we have been granted this access. Because outside of Him, the way is blocked. Period. It's guarded. But through Him, He has made a way for that. And therefore, in absolute humility before Him then, we can give glory unto the King Almighty. Okay, and so, where do we find truth? Genesis 24. And it came to be before he had ended speaking, that is now Eliezer, the servant of Abraham, looking for a bride for his son, not for his son, but for Abraham's son. That see Rivka, who was born to Bethuel, the son of Michal, the wife of Nahor, Abraham's brother, came out with her jar on her shoulder. And the servant said, Blessed be Jehovah Elohim of my master Abraham, who has not forsaken his kindness and his truth. What truth? The truth of the covenant. Assured firmness of the covenant towards my master. As for me, being on the direct, on the way, Jehovah led me, He guided me through this uncharted territory. I need a bride for Isaac. But then a long list of specifications. Cannot be this, cannot be this, cannot be this, must be from this, must be from this. Go find her at a place where you don't know, where you haven't even been. And so he has been led to the house of my master. So finding a bride for Isaac, the bride for the son of the covenant. We know Isaac is a type of Messiah. And Rivka is the bride. Jehovah is the guide on the way through uncharted territory, the drive through the wilderness, making a way where there is none, according to His assured firmness, His established covenant, to find a bride for His son. And so we've got the role play. The Father is the L of truth. There's no higher definition for truth than His name Himself. That's truth. He linked His own name to that, assured firmness. Isaac is the son, the servant, Eliezer, the Holy Spirit. Abraham, the root of the family tree, Rivka is the bride. And we see the Spirit and the truth working together to find a bride for the son, guiding them through the way, the truth, and there they are worshipping the Father. So, if we've gone through this, where do we find life? Back in the garden. And Jehovah Elohim formed man out of dust from the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. There's no more obstacles. And so, with this I would like to conclude. It's a very simple message. But our journey of faith through uncharted territory is a journey that takes us back to the garden. And on this journey, we are going to hear many voices from different places. And it is going to take discernment, which is the role of the Holy Spirit and of the Word, to guide us through. Because this week's Torah portion and last week's one, the one on the spies and the one on Korach, is of such incredible importance at this juncture of time that we are in. Because if we're missing the message, we die in the wilderness. Then all the fights, all the struggles, all the pains, all the efforts, it's like, why? But whatever the obstacle is that you may face today, or might face in future, it is but the holding place. It's but a training ground for faith. And it's also a training ground to learn, to discern His voice. Him who is the way, the truth, and the life. And I was wondering, Chris, I haven't discussed it with you and the team, but would you not like, please, to lead us into I Exalt Thee first again? Because I think it's so appropriate in the context of what we've discussed and of Korach. Just to get the orders right. We exalt you, O King of heaven and earth. It's not for us. And therefore, while they're preparing, Father who art in heaven, glory unto your name. While you direct us through the wilderness, may we never be upset. May we never find fault. Might we never battle and struggle with the fact that we are in the wilderness, that we are stuck. May we have fresh eyes to look at those places where we are stuck in and ask that you will come to us where we are at that place of being stuck and teach us. Teach us. Learn us. Teach us how to hear your voice, because you are the way, the truth, the life, leading us back to the garden, to your glory. We exalt thee.
I